I'm Chen, 29, a software engineer and app developer who just received the message that destroyed everything I thought I knew about family. Don't come to Amy's graduation. We've decided it's better if you're not there. My own sister, the same sister whose entire college education I'd funded with $78,000 of my own money, whose dreams I'd made possible when our parents couldn't afford them. My hands shook as I stared at my phone, surrounded by the 47 meticulously organized folders on my laptop containing 4 years' worth of tuition receipts, housing payments, and care packages I'd sent to make sure Amy had everything she needed. How could this happen? If you've ever felt the crushing weight of family betrayal, I understand your pain. Let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you've ever sacrificed everything for someone who ultimately cast you aside. Growing up in our cramped apartment in Queens, the dynamic between my sister Amy and me was established before I could even understand it. 7 years my junior, Amy was always the miracle child in our parents' eyes. David and Linda Chen, first-generation immigrants who saw in their younger daughter everything they dreamed America could offer their family. I can trace this pattern back to our earliest memories. When I was 10 and Amy was 3, my parents threw an elaborate birthday party for her, rented community center, professional photographer, custom cake shaped like a princess castle. 6 months later, my 11th birthday consisted of pizza delivery and a grocery store cake. When I asked why the celebrations were so different, my mother simply said, "Amy is special. She needs to know she can achieve anything in America." This explanation became the soundtrack of my childhood. By middle school, I'd accepted my role as Amy's support system. While she received praise for average grades, I was expected to maintain honor roll status without recognition. When she accidentally deleted my science project the night before it was due, I was scolded for not backing up my work properly. The message was clear: Amy's potential was precious, and everyone else existed to protect it. The pattern intensified through high school. I joined robotics club, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and worked weekend jobs, desperately seeking the validation my parents freely gave Amy. Meanwhile, Amy coasted through with C+ averages while receiving constant encouragement about her creative spirit and unique perspective. The defining moment came during my senior year. I'd been accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship, but we still needed $15,000 for my first year. 2 weeks before the deposit deadline, Amy was diagnosed with a learning disability that would require expensive tutoring. My parents looked to me with that familiar expression of expectation mixed with guilt. "Sarah, we know this is hard, but Amy needs the support more than you need that fancy school," my father said. "You're so smart. You'll succeed anywhere. Amy might not get another chance like this." I gave up MIT without argument, watching my dreams dissolve while Amy received the specialized tutoring that transformed her academic performance. I enrolled at a local state university instead, working full-time to pay my own way while living at home to save money. Despite this setback, I threw myself into computer science with fierce determination. Working 3 part-time jobs simultaneously, I put myself through college while building my programming skills. Every free moment was devoted to learning new technologies, developing apps, and networking with industry professionals. My parents celebrated Amy's improved grades as a family triumph, while I quietly coded through the nights, building the foundation for my future career. The early years after graduation were brutal. I worked at a tech startup during the day, while freelancing evenings and weekends. Gradually, my reputation grew. Companies began requesting me specifically for complex projects. When I noticed a gap in the market for productivity apps, I developed my own software solution. 5 years of relentless work transformed my one-person freelance operation into Chen Digital Solutions, with a small team and contracts with Fortune 500 companies. I achieved financial stability through pure determination, despite never receiving the family support Amy took for granted. Throughout this period, Amy's life followed a predictable pattern. After high school, she attended community college for 2 years with mediocre performance. During her frequent academic struggles, my parents covered her expenses and blamed external factors: bad professors, overwhelming course loads, social pressures. Occasionally, Amy would ask me for loans when she wanted something extra. Concert tickets, designer clothes, or spring break trips. These loans were never repaid, and any mention of repayment was met with accusations of being materialistic. Despite this history, I maintained hope that our relationship would eventually mature into something more balanced. Every family gathering, I arrived optimistic that this would be the time my achievements received acknowledgement, that my parents would finally see my worth, that Amy would show genuine appreciation for my support. Instead, holidays followed the same script. Amy dominated conversations with dramatic stories about her professors, friends, or creative projects. My parents hung on every word, offering advice, sympathy, or celebration as needed. When I mentioned landing a major client or launching a new app, the response was typically, "That's nice, honey," before quickly returning attention to Amy. I built my business partly as validation, concrete proof of my worth that no one could dismiss. Yet, no matter how successful I became professionally, the family dynamic remained unchanged. I was the reliable one, expected to give endlessly while requiring nothing in return. Amy was the treasured one whose every need and want took priority. This was our family ecosystem when Amy announced she wanted to transfer to Columbia University to study film, a decision that would change everything. Amy's transfer announcement came during a Sunday family dinner 18 months ago. I'd arrived early to help my mother prepare the meal, another unacknowledged expectation, when Amy burst through the door with uncharacteristic excitement. "I got accepted to Columbia," she announced, waving a letter in the air. "They want me in their film program." My parents erupted in celebration. My mother immediately started crying. My father pulled out a bottle of wine he'd apparently been saving for a special occasion. I pushed aside the twinge of hurt. No such bottle had appeared when I landed my first six-figure contract, and embraced my sister with genuine happiness. "That's amazing, Amy," I said, examining the acceptance letter. "Columbia has an incredible program." Over dinner, Amy described her vision for her film career, her professor's encouragement, and her dreams of making documentaries that would change the world. As she talked, I felt the familiar mixture of emotions, happiness for her success combined with the ache of knowing my parents would never find my accomplishments as worthy of celebration. Then came the conversation that would define the next 2 years of my life. "The only problem is the cost," my father said, his expression growing serious. "Columbia is expensive, and with Amy transferring as a junior, she won't qualify for much financial aid." "How expensive?" I asked, already sensing where this conversation was heading. "About $78,000 for the remaining 2 years, Amy said quietly. "Tuition, housing, living expenses. I know it's a lot, but this is my dream school, my dream program." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My parents' income was too high for need-based aid, but too low to comfortably afford Columbia's price tag. They'd already stretched their finances supporting Amy through community college and her first year at state school. "Sarah," my mother began tentatively, "you've done so well with your business. We were wondering if you might be able to help Amy with this opportunity." "You want me to pay for Amy's college?" I asked, wanting to clarify before responding. "Not pay for it," my father clarified quickly. "More like an investment in her future. She'll pay you back once she's established in her career." I looked at Amy, who was staring at her plate with tears in her eyes. "This is my one chance," she whispered. "If I don't transfer now, I'll never get into a program this good. Please, Sarah. I promise I'll make it worth it." Against every instinct I'd developed from years of broken promises and unrepaid loans, I heard myself say, "Let me think about it." That night, I reviewed my business finances and personal savings. $78,000 represented a significant portion of my emergency fund and planned business expansion capital. It would require me to delay hiring new employees, postpone upgrading my equipment, and eliminate my personal safety net. But as I sat in my apartment, looking at a framed photo of Amy and me from her high school graduation, I convinced myself this would be different. This wasn't a frivolous expense or temporary loan. This was an investment in Amy's future, a gesture so significant it would finally transform our family dynamics. Surely this level of sacrifice would earn me the recognition and appreciation I'd sought my entire life. 3 days later, I called Amy with my decision. "I'll cover your Columbia expenses," I told her, immediately hearing her sharp intake of breath. "Really?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief and joy. "Sarah, oh my God, really?" "Really. But I want to be clear about expectations. This is a significant financial commitment for me, and I need to know you're taking it seriously." "Of course. I'll work so hard, I promise. I'll get amazing grades and make you proud and pay you back as soon as I can after graduation." "I don't need you to pay me back immediately," I said, surprising myself with my generosity. "But I do want you to understand the sacrifice this represents. I'm using money I was planning to invest in growing my business." "I understand completely," Amy said earnestly. "This means everything to me, Sarah. You're literally making my dreams possible. I'll never forget this." For the first time in our relationship, I felt like Amy truly saw me, not as the reliable sister who handled logistics, but as someone making an extraordinary sacrifice for her happiness. 2 weeks later, I transferred the first payment to Columbia, $39,000 to cover Amy's junior year tuition and housing. As I watched the money leave my account, I felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. This was either the best decision I'd ever made or the most expensive mistake. Amy's first semester at Columbia unfolded like a fairy tale. She called me weekly with updates about her professors, her classmates, and her film projects. For the first time in our relationship, I felt like her primary supporter rather than background logistics coordinator. Professor Martinez said my documentary concept is the most sophisticated he's seen from a transfer student, she told me during one particularly enthusiastic call. And I met this amazing group of filmmakers who want to collaborate with me. I created a comprehensive tracking system to monitor Amy's academic progress and expenses. Unlike the wedding planning files that would later haunt me, these documents filled me with pride. Every tuition payment, every housing deposit, every textbook reimbursement represented an investment in Amy's potential. When Amy sent me her midterm grades, 3 A's and 1 B+, I felt validation for my decision. She was thriving academically in ways she never had before. My investment was working. "I can't believe how much I love it here," Amy said during a video call from her dorm room. "Everything feels right, you know? Like this is where I was meant to be." During winter break, Amy came home with a portfolio of her work from the semester. My parents and I gathered in the living room as she showed us her short films, photography projects, and documentary footage. The quality was impressive, far beyond anything she'd produced during her previous academic years. "This is incredible, sweetheart," my mother said, tears in her eyes. "You're so talented." "I couldn't have done any of this without Sarah," Amy said, looking at me directly. "She made all of this possible." For a brief moment, my parents' attention shifted to me. My father nodded appreciatively, and my mother squeezed my hand. "You're a good sister," she said simply. It wasn't the elaborate recognition I'd dreamed of, but it felt like progress. Amy was acknowledging my contribution, my parents were noticing my sacrifice, and the family dynamics seemed to be shifting in a healthier direction. Spring semester brought more encouraging updates. Amy maintained her strong grades while developing a documentary about first-generation college students that earned recognition from her professors. She joined the Film Society, volunteered with the Campus Media Center, and began networking with industry professionals who visited the program. "This summer, I might get an internship at an independent production company," she told me excitedly. "They loved my portfolio, and Professor Chen recommended me personally." As Amy's junior year concluded with a 3.7 GPA and growing professional connections, I felt confident in my investment. She'd matured academically and personally, taking her education seriously in ways she never had before. The transformation seemed to validate everything I'd hoped this opportunity would accomplish. During summer break, Amy worked her first industry internship at a documentary production company in Manhattan. She lived at home to save money, but spent long days in the city learning about film production, editing, and distribution. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time in years, our family dinners focused on genuinely interesting topics as Amy shared stories from her professional experiences. "The producer told me I have a natural eye for storytelling," she said one evening. "She suggested I consider applying for graduate programs after I finish my bachelor's degree." "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely proud of her growth. "You've really found your calling." As we prepared for Amy's senior year, I felt optimistic about our relationship and her future. The financial sacrifice had been significant, but the results seemed to justify it. Amy was excelling academically, developing professionally, and finally acknowledging my role in making her success possible. I had no idea that the foundation for everything I believed about our transformed relationship was already beginning to crack beneath my feet. Amy's senior year began with concerning changes I initially dismissed as normal college stress. What started as weekly phone calls became sporadic text messages. Her enthusiastic updates about professors and projects were replaced by brief responses about being super busy with her thesis film. During October, I called to check on her midterm progress. Instead of the detailed academic updates I'd grown accustomed to, Amy seemed distracted and vague. "Everything's fine," she said when I asked about her grades. "Just really intense this semester, you know? Everyone's competing for the best thesis projects and trying to impress the faculty." "How's your documentary coming along?" I asked, referring to the ambitious project she'd been planning since summer. "It's whatever. Turns out the topic I wanted to explore has been done before, so I had to start over. But it's fine. Professor Martinez thinks my new concept has potential." The conversation felt forced and distant, lacking the excitement that had characterized our talks throughout her junior year. When I mentioned visiting campus for Parents' Weekend, Amy quickly deflected. "It's probably better if you skip it this year," she said. "I'll be editing constantly, and there's not really time for social stuff." I felt hurt by the dismissal but told myself it was temporary stress related to her thesis requirements. Senior year was notoriously demanding, especially in competitive programs like Columbia's film school. In November, my concern deepened when Amy called asking for additional money beyond her regular expenses. "The equipment rental costs are higher than I expected," she explained. "And I need to hire some actors for my thesis film. It's only about $2,000 extra, but it would really help me create something professional quality." I transferred the money without hesitation, viewing it as a worthwhile investment in her final project. However, her request felt different from previous conversations about expenses. Less grateful, more expectant, as though my financial support was something she was entitled to rather than something she appreciated. 2 weeks later, she called again with another request. "I know I just asked for money, but there's this amazing opportunity," she said, her voice taking on the pleading tone I remembered from childhood. "There's a film festival in Los Angeles where students can submit their work, but the application fee and travel costs would be about $1,500. This could be huge for my career, Sarah." "Of course," I said, though I felt a growing unease about the increasing requests. "Send me the details." As I processed the payment, I noticed Amy hadn't provided specific information about the festival. No name, no dates, no details about the submission requirements. When I asked for clarification, she became defensive. "God, Sarah, do you need to micromanage everything? It's a legitimate festival. I'm not making it up." "I wasn't suggesting you were," I replied, taken aback by her hostile tone. "I'd just like to stay informed about how the money is being used." "Well, maybe you shouldn't have offered to pay if you were going to be weird about it," she snapped before ending the call abruptly. That conversation marked a turning point. Amy's attitude toward my financial support shifted from gratitude to entitlement, from collaboration to resentment when I asked questions. The warm, appreciative sister who had thanked me for making her dreams possible was replaced by someone who seemed annoyed by my involvement in her education. December brought the first major red flag I couldn't ignore. During winter break, Amy came home with her portfolio from the semester. As she showed us her work, I noticed the quality had declined significantly from her previous projects. The thesis film she'd been developing looked rushed and amateurish, lacking the sophistication she'd demonstrated in her junior year work. "This is very creative, sweetheart," my mother said diplomatically, though I could see the confusion in her expression. "Professor Martinez loves it," Amy said defensively, as though responding to unspoken criticism. He says it's exactly the kind of experimental work that pushes boundaries. Later that evening, I tried to discuss my observations with Amy privately. I noticed your thesis project seems different from your earlier work, I said carefully. Is everything okay with your classes? Everything's fine, she replied curtly. Just because it's not what you expected doesn't mean it's not good. I wasn't criticizing, I clarified. I'm just concerned because your previous work was so polished and this seems what? Not good enough for your investment. Amy's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to control my education. I'm not trying to control anything, I said, hurt by her interpretation. I'm concerned because I care about your success.
Right.
You care about your investment. There's a difference. She left the room before I could respond, leaving me stunned by the venom in her voice. When had my support become control? When had my concern become about investment returns rather than her well-being? The spring semester of Amy's senior year brought increasingly troubling developments. Her communication became even more sporadic, and when she did call, she seemed distracted and irritable. The enthusiastic film student who had once shared every detail of her academic life now provided minimal updates about her progress. In February, I received a call from Columbia's financial aid office that shattered my remaining illusions about Amy's academic performance. Miss Chen, the administrator said, I'm calling regarding your sister Amy's academic standing. She's currently on academic probation and at risk of not graduating on time. My heart dropped. Academic probation? What does that mean exactly? She's failing 2 of her 4 courses this semester, and her overall GPA has fallen below the minimum requirement for graduation. She'll need to bring her grades up significantly to receive her degree in May. After ending the call, I immediately tried to reach Amy. She didn't answer my calls or respond to my texts for 3 days. When she finally called back, her explanation was dismissive and blame-shifting. The professors here are totally unreasonable, she said. They expect way more work than any normal person can handle. Plus, my thesis advisor changed the requirements halfway through the semester. Amy, you're on academic probation, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. That's not about unreasonable professors. That's about not completing your coursework. God, you're just like them, she snapped. Everyone expects me to be perfect all the time. Do you know how much pressure I'm under? I know the pressure is intense, I replied, but I've invested nearly $80,000 in your education. I need to understand what's happening. There it is, Amy said bitterly. I knew you'd throw the money in my face eventually. You're just like everyone else who thinks they own me because they help me. The call ended with Amy hanging up on me, leaving me reeling from both the academic news and her hostile response. The sister who had once promised to make me proud and never forget my sacrifice now seemed to view my concern as harassment and my investment as manipulation. Over the following weeks, I tried multiple times to discuss Amy's academic situation with my parents, hoping they might intervene or offer guidance. Their response was predictably disappointing. Amy's under a lot of stress, my mother said when I explained the probation status. Senior year is overwhelming for everyone. She's failing 2 classes, I emphasized. This isn't normal academic stress. Maybe you're putting too much pressure on her, my father suggested. She knows you've invested money in her education. That might be making her more anxious. Once again, I found myself portrayed as the problem. Amy's academic failure was somehow my fault for caring too much about the outcome of my investment. The family dynamic I'd hoped would change through my sacrifice remained exactly the same. Amy's struggles were everyone else's responsibility, and my legitimate concerns were dismissed as unreasonable expectations. In March, 3 months before Amy's scheduled graduation, I discovered information that devastated my remaining faith in her honesty. Through a mutual friend who attended Columbia, I learned that Amy had been skipping classes regularly and spending most of her time socializing rather than working on her thesis. I see her at parties all the time, Jessica told me during a chance encounter in Manhattan. She's always talking about how her family is loaded and how she doesn't need to worry about grades because her sister will take care of everything. The casual cruelty of Amy's words hit me like a physical blow. Not only was she failing academically while I funded her education, but she was actively disparaging me to her peers, presenting my sacrifice as evidence of my obligation to support her regardless of her efforts. When I confronted Amy about Jessica's observations, she immediately became defensive and accusatory. "You're spying on me now?" she said indignantly. "That's really sick, Sarah. I can't believe you're having people watch me and report back to you." "I wasn't spying," I explained. "Jessica mentioned she'd seen you, and I asked how you were doing."
Right.
"Because you can't trust me to tell you myself. This is exactly why I don't want to talk to you anymore. You're so controlling and paranoid." "Amy, I just want to understand what's happening with your education." "My education is fine," she interrupted. "Maybe it's not meeting your impossible standards, but it's my life and my degree. You don't get to micromanage me just because you paid some bills." Some bills. $78,000 had become some bills in Amy's revised narrative of our relationship. As April arrived and graduation approached, Amy's communication with me stopped almost entirely. She ignored my calls, responded to texts with single-word answers, and avoided coming home for spring break. My parents, rather than addressing Amy's behavior, suggested I was being too demanding and should give her space to focus on finishing her degree. The isolation was crushing. I'd sacrificed my financial security and business growth to support Amy's dreams, and now I was being punished for caring about the outcome. The family dynamics I'd hoped to transform through my generosity had instead become more toxic than ever. Then came the notification that destroyed everything I believed about family loyalty. I was reviewing quarterly financial reports for my business when my phone chimed with a group text notification. The participants included Amy, my parents, and several extended family members I rarely heard from. Amy had apparently created the group to share graduation information. I scrolled up to see the context of previous messages and found a conversation that made my blood run cold. Amy had been complaining about my constant harassment regarding her academic performance. She described my concern about her grades as obsessive and claimed I was trying to control her life through financial manipulation. Then came the message that shattered my world. "Sarah is not invited to graduation. I don't want her there making everything about herself and her money. This is MY Day, and I don't want it ruined by her judgment and negativity." My father had responded, "That's probably for the best, sweetheart. Sarah has been pretty intense about the whole college situation." My mother added, "We understand, honey. This should be a celebration, not a stress situation." And finally, the message that broke my heart completely. "Thanks for understanding. I knew you'd support me. Sarah can watch the live stream if she really wants to see it, but I need my graduation to be about my achievement, not her investment." I stared at my phone in disbelief, reading the messages over and over. After funding Amy's entire Columbia education, after sacrificing my own business growth and financial security, after 2 years of supporting her dreams, even when she failed to meet basic academic requirements, I was being excluded from her graduation because my presence would somehow diminish her achievement. The physical reaction was immediate and overwhelming. My hands trembled so violently, I dropped my phone. My chest constricted as though caught in a vice, each breath requiring conscious effort. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead as nausea rose in my throat. I called my best friend Marcus immediately, my voice so distorted by crying he initially couldn't understand me. "I'm coming over," he said without hesitation. "Don't move. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Marcus arrived to find me still in the same position at my desk, staring blankly at my phone. He read the messages, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to fury. "This is beyond cruel," he said, sitting beside me and taking my phone away. "This is financial abuse, Sarah. From your entire family." With Marcus's steady presence anchoring me, I poured out everything, not just the graduation exclusion, but the lifetime of family dynamics that had led to this moment. I described the pattern of endless giving while receiving nothing in return, the constant dismissal of my needs and feelings, the celebration of Amy's every whim while my achievements went unacknowledged. I've been so naive, I concluded through fresh tears. I actually believed this would change things, that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, they'd finally see my worth. You weren't naive, Marcus countered firmly. You were hopeful, and they've exploited that hope your entire life. For the next 2 days, I couldn't function normally. Marcus stayed with me, fielding calls from worried clients and bringing me food I couldn't eat. I oscillated between numbness and crushing pain, between disbelief and rage, between lifelong conditioning to prioritize Amy's happiness and the dawning realization that I deserved better treatment. On the 3rd day, I began to think more clearly. With Marcus's encouragement, I reviewed exactly what I'd contributed to Amy's education. Columbia tuition, 2 years $52,000. Housing and meal plans, $18,000. Additional expenses and equipment, $8,000. Total investment, $78,000. Plus countless hours of emotional support, family mediation, and personal sacrifice of my own business opportunities. And for this extraordinary generosity, I had been cast aside when I no longer served my family's purposes. This isn't love, Marcus said quietly as we reviewed the figures. This is exploitation. I contacted my attorney, explaining the situation and asking about my legal obligations. His assessment was clear. While I had moral obligations to my own conscience, I had no legal obligation to continue supporting someone who explicitly excluded me from major life events after taking my money. Document everything, he advised. Every payment, every communication, every instance of their treatment. Then decide what you want to do next from a position of knowledge rather than emotion. For the next several hours, I methodically compiled evidence of my financial investment in Amy's education. I created backups of all payment records and communications. I documented every transfer with dates, amounts, and purposes. I secured copies of text messages and emails showing the evolution of my involvement and my family's expectations. Throughout this process, something fundamental shifted within me. The shock and hurt began to transform into clarity and resolve. I recognized that this devastating exclusion was merely the culmination of a lifetime pattern, not an isolated incident. I saw with painful clarity how I had participated in my own mistreatment by continually accepting the unacceptable. With this new perspective came a decisive plan of action. I would not continue to enable my family's exploitation. I would not silently absorb this final humiliation. I would stand up for myself with the same determination I'd always directed towards supporting Amy's goals. I carefully composed my response, reviewing it with both Marcus and my attorney to ensure it conveyed my position clearly without creating legal complications. Then, with a steadiness that surprised me, I sent a single message to the group thread. Since my presence at graduation would diminish Amy's achievement, perhaps my financial contribution has had the same effect. Effective immediately, I'm discontinuing all support. Pay for the rest yourselves. Before anyone could respond, I systematically executed the next phase of my plan. First, I contacted Columbia's financial aid office and requested that my name be removed from all future billing communications. I canceled the automatic payment authorization for Amy's final semester expenses. Next, I blocked every family member on my phone, email, and social media platforms. The digital severance was swift and complete, a virtual door slammed on decades of toxic family dynamics. Finally, I changed my phone number and informed only my closest friends and business contacts of the new information. When it was done, I sat in unexpected silence, my breathing steady for the first time in days. The pain remained, a raw wound that would take time to heal. But alongside it grew something new and unfamiliar, a sense of power. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself over Amy's demands, my own well-being over my parents' expectations. How do you feel? Marcus asked cautiously. I considered the question carefully before answering. Like I've finally stopped carrying a weight I was never supposed to carry in the first place. The response to my actions was swift and predictable. Within hours of sending my message and implementing my plan, my old phone exploded with notifications before the number change took effect. Voicemails ranged from Amy's hysterical accusations to my father's cold fury to various relatives' attempts at guilt-laden mediation. I listened to each message once, documented it, then deleted it. Each voice carried less power than it would have days earlier. My family's ability to manipulate my emotions through guilt, obligation, and fear had diminished dramatically once I recognized the pattern for what it was. My attorney confirmed what I already suspected. Despite the threats and emotional manipulation, my family had no viable legal claim against me. I had documentation proving my financial contributions were gifts, not loans or contractual obligations. I had acted ethically while protecting myself from further exploitation. The most difficult period was the first month of separation. Decades of conditioning had trained me to prioritize family harmony above my own well-being. Each day required conscious effort to maintain my boundaries, to remind myself I deserved better treatment than I had received. I worked with a therapist Marcus recommended, beginning the long process of untangling my self-worth from my family's approval. Through therapy, I began to understand how my parents' immigrant experience and cultural values had created a family dynamic where Amy's success was viewed as validation of their American dream, while my achievements were simply expected. This understanding didn't excuse their treatment of me, but it helped me process my grief, because it was grief, despite the toxicity of those relationships. I mourned the family I had wished for rather than the one I actually had. I acknowledged the pain of rejection while recognizing it reflected their limitations, not my worth. 3 weeks after graduation, which I learned through social media had proceeded as scheduled with Amy receiving her degree despite her academic struggles, I received an unexpected call. Jessica, the mutual friend who had first alerted me to Amy's behavior, reached out with information that provided some closure. "I thought you should know," she said carefully. "Amy didn't actually finish her thesis film. She submitted something she threw together in 2 weeks, and several professors were pretty critical of her work. She graduated, but barely." The news confirmed what I had suspected. My $78,000 investment had funded not just Amy's education, but her opportunity to coast through a prestigious program without applying the effort required for genuine success. 6 months after the graduation incident, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The financial setback of Amy's education required strategic adjustments to my business, which ultimately strengthened my professional practices. I implemented clearer boundaries with all clients, including family, and developed more sustainable growth strategies. Most importantly, I reclaimed time and energy previously consumed by family drama. I expanded my app development services, launched a mentorship program for young women in tech, and cultivated business relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Therapy helped me develop what my therapist called a chosen family, relationships built on genuine care and reciprocity rather than biological obligation. Marcus remained my steadfast supporter, and several business colleagues became close friends. Former clients invited me into their lives as more than just their service provider. These connections, freely chosen and mutually nurturing, began filling the void left by family estrangement. 1 year after the graduation incident, unexpected news reached me through a former colleague. Amy was struggling to find work in the film industry, despite her Columbia degree. According to the information I received, her portfolio was insufficient for most entry-level positions, and she lacked the technical skills employers expected from recent graduates. 2 weeks later, my parents attempted to contact me through my business website. After 18 months of silence, their message struck a tentatively apologetic tone. "We've been thinking about everything that happened," my mother wrote. "Perhaps we could meet and talk. Family should find a way to work things out." I considered their outreach carefully, consulting both my therapist and trusted friends before responding. The old Sarah would have jumped at this opportunity, desperate for reconciliation at any cost. The new Sarah approached it with careful boundaries and realistic expectations. I agreed to meet them, not at their home or mine, but in a neutral public space with a defined time limit. I prepared myself for various scenarios, from genuine apology to subtle manipulation designed to restore my financial support for Amy's continued struggles. Whether this tentative reconnection leads to meaningful change remains to be seen. What matters more is that I no longer depend on their validation for my sense of self-worth. I've discovered that family relationships, like all relationships, should be evaluated by how they impact our well-being, not by the accident of shared DNA. The most profound transformation has been internal. I've learned that love shouldn't require financial sacrifice or emotional martyrdom. I've recognized that my worth exists independently of others' ability to acknowledge it. I've found peace with my decisions, regardless of whether reconciliation with my family ultimately occurs. I've built confidence in setting and maintaining boundaries, not as punishment or retaliation, but as necessary protection for my well-being. I've created a life based on mutual respect rather than obligation, surrounding myself with people who value me for who I am rather than what I can provide. Most importantly, I've discovered that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no to mistreatment, even when it comes from family. If you've ever struggled with family dynamics where you feel undervalued or financially exploited, I hope my story helps you recognize your worth. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to value themselves. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength through difficult situations. Remember that you deserve relationships that honor your worth, whether they're with family, friends, or partners. 5 years have passed since that devastating text message changed everything. As I sit in my corner office overlooking Manhattan, watching the sunset paint the city in golden hues, I can barely recognize the woman I used to be. The scared, desperate for approval person who once sacrificed her MIT dreams feels like a character from someone else's story. Chen Digital Solutions now employs 47 people across 3 offices. We've become the go-to firm for Fortune 100 companies needing innovative app solutions. Last month, Forbes featured me in their 40 Under 40 list, calling me the quiet revolutionary transforming how enterprises think about user experience. The article sits framed on my desk, not because I need the validation anymore, but because it represents something I never thought possible, being valued for who I am, not what I can give. The journey here wasn't linear. Those first 2 years after cutting contact with my family were the hardest of my life. I threw myself into work with an intensity that bordered on unhealthy, building my company as much to prove my worth to myself as to create something meaningful. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped me recognize that I was still operating from the same wounded place, just redirecting my need for validation from family to professional success. The real breakthrough came during my 3rd year of therapy. Dr. Martinez asked me a simple question that changed everything. Sarah, if you never achieved another professional milestone, if your business stayed exactly the same size it is today, would you still consider yourself worthy of love? I couldn't answer. The silence stretched between us for what felt like hours as I grappled with the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, my worth wasn't tied to my achievements at all. That session marked the beginning of my real healing. I started dating, something I'd barely done while pouring all my energy into work and family obligations. I learned to receive care without feeling obligated to reciprocate tenfold. I discovered what it felt like to be loved for my sense of humor, my terrible cooking attempts, my habit of talking to plants, rather than my ability to solve problems or write checks. 3 years ago, I met David Kim at a tech conference in San Francisco. He was presenting on sustainable software architecture, and I was captivated not just by his expertise, but by his obvious passion for creating technology that made the world better rather than just more profitable. After his presentation, I approached him with what I thought was a professional question about implementation strategies. 2 hours later, we were still talking, having moved from technical discussions to philosophy, travel, shared experiences growing up in immigrant families, and our mutual love of obscure documentaries. When he asked if I'd like to continue the conversation over dinner, I almost said yes out of habit, then caught myself and actually considered whether I wanted to have dinner with him. I did. Very much. David was the first person I'd met who seemed genuinely unimpressed by my professional success. Not dismissive, he respected my work, but it wasn't what drew him to me. He was fascinated by my collection of vintage cameras, delighted by my encyclopedic knowledge of 1980s movies, and charmed by my tendency to leave encouraging notes for my houseplants. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than need or obligation. When I finally told him about my family situation, he listened without trying to fix anything or offer unsolicited advice. His response was simple: "That sounds incredibly painful. I'm glad you chose to protect yourself." No one in my life had ever framed my boundary setting as self-care rather than selfishness. We moved in together last year, creating a home that feels nothing like the cramped Queen's apartment of my childhood. Our space is filled with light, plants, books, and the kind of comfortable silence that comes from being truly accepted. David's family welcomed me immediately, not because they needed anything from me, but simply because I made their son happy. His parents, both university professors, treat me with a kind of casual affection I'd always craved from my own family. His mother sends me articles she thinks I'll find interesting. His father asks my opinion on tech policy issues, genuinely valuing my perspective. It's the family dynamic I dreamed of, but never experienced. The contrast became especially stark 18 months ago when my parents made their third attempt at reconciliation. I'd moved on from the tentative coffee meeting we'd had after Amy's graduation struggles. That initial conversation had revealed that they still fundamentally misunderstood the situation. They framed the graduation exclusion as a misunderstanding and seemed to expect that acknowledging it had been handled poorly would be sufficient to restore our relationship. When I explained that the graduation incident was merely the culmination of decades of unequal treatment, they became defensive. My mother started crying, saying I was destroying the family over money. My father accused me of being selfish and unforgiving, unable to understand why I couldn't just move forward for everyone's sake. I left that meeting with clarity. They weren't interested in understanding my perspective or changing their behavior. They wanted me to return to my old role as Amy's support system and family problem solver, just with better communication about their expectations. Their latest outreach came through David's LinkedIn profile, a move so inappropriate it actually made me laugh. The message from my mother was longer and more desperate than previous attempts. "Sarah, we know you're engaged now. We weren't, but close. We want to be part of your life, part of your happiness. Amy has been struggling, and she realizes now how much she hurt you. She wants to apologize, to make things right. Can't we try to be a family again? Life is too short for this separation." David read the message with raised eyebrows. "They're messaging me now? Boundaries have never been their strong suit," I replied, surprised by how little the contact affected me emotionally. I realized then how completely I'd healed from their ability to manipulate my emotions. The desperate, approval-seeking daughter who might have jumped at any sign of family reconciliation was gone. In her place was a woman who understood her worth and wouldn't compromise her peace for anyone's comfort, not even family. I sent a brief, professional response through David's account. "Please respect our privacy, and do not contact us through professional or personal channels. If you're genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship, the process begins with acknowledging the decades of harmful behavior, not minimizing it as misunderstandings. Until that happens, continued contact is unwelcome." They haven't reached out since. The absence of family drama has created space for relationships I never could have imagined. My chosen family now includes David's relatives, my business partners who've become close friends, former clients who've evolved into genuine companions, and a book club I joined on a whim that meets monthly in my living room. Last month, one of my book club friends, Elena, was going through a difficult divorce. Without being asked, our group rallied around her, bringing meals, offering spare bedrooms, providing emotional support and practical assistance. Watching this organic outpouring of care, I was struck by the contrast to my family dynamic. These people supported Elena because they cared about her well-being, not because they felt obligated or expected something in return. "This is what family actually looks like," I told David later that evening. The business side of my life has flourished in ways that directly correlate to my personal growth. As I've learned to value myself appropriately, I've become much better at recognizing and avoiding exploitative professional relationships. I no longer take on clients who expect unlimited availability for minimal compensation or who treat my team disrespectfully. This year, we're launching a nonprofit initiative providing free app development services for organizations working on social justice issues. The program is funded entirely through our profits, and I'm more excited about this project than any commercial venture we've undertaken. Using my success to create positive change feels like the fulfillment of everything I'd hoped my career would become. I've also started mentoring young women in tech, particularly those from immigrant families who struggle with balancing family expectations and personal goals. Many of them share stories eerily similar to my own, being expected to sacrifice their ambitions for siblings, having their achievements dismissed while family resources flow to less motivated relatives, feeling guilty for wanting more for themselves. Your family's inability to see your worth doesn't diminish your worth, I tell them repeatedly. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own diminishment. These conversations often bring up my own remaining complicated feelings about Amy. Through social media monitoring I've occasionally done, more out of curiosity than attachment, I know her film career never materialized. She's working in marketing now, seemingly content with a conventional path that required none of the dramatic financial sacrifice my family demanded for her artistic dreams. Part of me wonders if she ever thinks about the $78,000 I invested in her Columbia education, whether she's connected her current struggles to her failure to apply herself during those expensive years. A larger part of me no longer cares. Her choices and consequences belong to her now, not to me. The most profound change has been in my relationship with money itself. Having been taught to use financial support as a way to earn love and approval, I had to completely relearn healthy money boundaries. David and I split expenses equitably. We discuss major purchases openly, and neither of us uses money as a tool for control or manipulation. When we decided to buy a house together 6 months ago, we approached it as genuine partners. I contributed more to the down payment because I earn more, but every decision was made jointly. The house belongs to both of us equally, regardless of financial contribution ratios. This kind of balanced partnership would have been impossible for the person I used to be. Standing in our kitchen last weekend, watching David make pancakes while humming off-key to a playlist I created, I felt something I'd never experienced before, complete contentment with who I am and what I've built. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Brunch tomorrow? Elena wants to hear about your nonprofit launch. I typed back. Absolutely. David's making his famous blueberry scones. This is my life now. Simple plans with people who care about me, professional work that fulfills me, a romantic partnership built on mutual respect, and most importantly, unshakable confidence in my own worth. The woman who once believed she had to fund other people's dreams to earn their love has been replaced by someone who understands that real love doesn't require payment plans. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if Amy had never excluded me from her graduation, if my family had continued accepting my financial support while taking my presence for granted. Would I have continued enabling their dysfunction indefinitely? Would I have ever learned to value myself appropriately? I can't know for certain, but I suspect that devastating text message was actually a gift. It forced me to confront a lifetime of unhealthy patterns and make choices I might never have made otherwise. In trying to hurt me, Amy accidentally freed me. 5 years later, I can honestly say I'm grateful for that freedom, even if the path to finding it was excruciating. Tomorrow, David and I are meeting with a wedding planner. We're planning a small ceremony next spring, intimate, joyful, filled with people who genuinely celebrate our happiness. My parents and Amy won't be there, and for the first time in my life, their absence feels like relief rather than loss. I'm no longer the woman who sacrificed her MIT dreams or funded someone else's education at the expense of her own growth. I'm Sarah Chen, successful entrepreneur, beloved partner, loyal friend, and woman who finally learned that her worth was never up for negotiation. And that, I've discovered, makes all the difference.